All right. Sorry for the delay. Hi, everyone. I think we can dive into this already. So please, apologies for the delay. So I have, okay, Victor, Binta. Hi, Binta. Good evening. And how are we doing today? So we are going to be taking a look at, Vue JS today, right? So this is our very first class, to discuss and understand a couple of things about, Vue. I'm sure you might have seen that probably somewhere on the internet. You might have used it before. Okay, it's a JavaScript framework for web developers, used for web development, right? For front end web development. So that is what we're going to be covering today. All right. Hi, Binta. Hi. Um, don't know why. Okay, that's AN. Okay, WebJ. Good evening, Victor, Joy, JP, and Imolayo. All right, so let's get started. I'm going to pull up my screen. Let's add my screen to the stage. I mean, so I believe by the end of you know learning and working with Vue, most of us are actually going to enjoy using the framework, right? I'll try as much as possible to ensure that I answer every single question that you have, as well as break down some of the concepts, to make it way easier for you to understand. I'll give a background of how I, got into using Vue. Vue was my preferred. I mean, even till now, it is my preferred, choice of framework for working with front-end applications. Right. Started off, of course, I started off web development as a desktop programmer, focused mostly on building desktop applications with VB6, right, .NET. Um, and I personally did not like using JavaScript or jQuery back in the day, but yeah, at some point I realized that the web was the future, and I had to get into web development. This was already like after 3 years of programming. So I went into web development, HTML, CSS, JavaScript. I mean, I could write these things, but I was not really building systems with. I was not really building applications with web technologies. Along the line, I used jQuery, right, Ajax, and some of those technologies. Dreamweaver, a lot of products from. I think I remember very well CoffeeScript, ActionScript, and all those stuff. So I decided to. I mean, at some point, I decided to explore some of these, frameworks. I think then Angular was a very popular option, right? Used it for a while. Um, yeah, used React as well for a while. Used stuff like Ember.js. I remember using Ember.js, but for some reasons, I got to use Vue on a simple project, and I loved it. I loved it primarily because it was simple to learn. It was simple to use. It was pretty straightforward, right? The way some of the sections are structured, and I'm going to try to replicate that flow, as regards how I got to learn Vue, how I got to use it. Of course, I'm also going to share the documentation with us because I think that is the best documentation you can, or the best material that you can literally use to learn Vue JS. Okay, so let's pull up the documentation here. So Vue.js documentation. Let's see. Okay, so let's see. Introduction. All right, I think I might have to also zoom in on this for some of you using your phones. Yeah, I'm sure you can see this. So basically, Vue.js, as I mentioned earlier, is a JavaScript framework, right, for building web applications. Okay, so what do we have here? This is a JavaScript framework for building user interfaces. It is okay. It builds on top of the standard HTML, CSS, and JavaScript, and provides a declarative and component-based programming model that helps you efficiently develop user interfaces. All right. So yeah, I mean, back then I was always building, desktop applications, WinForms, WPF, and also using Qt, C++, and all those stuff to build, user interfaces. If you have heard of PyQt and stuff like that. And then I got into, using Vue, And I would say it was a straightforward, experience, right? It was very simple. You don't have to think about a lot of a lot of complexities, or you wouldn't be so surprised about the way a lot of things work, right? So I am sure this will not be overly complex. All right, so let me just give us some illustrations. So you already know how to use HTML, CSS, of course, and your JavaScript code. So let's put it this way: you have your application, and basically you have the HTML, giving you the structure, right? You have CSS, which is something you basically plug into your HTML page. It can be within the HTML page, but in most cases you would probably want to have that separated. And you have this particular, this is your CSS, this is HTML, right? And then you probably want to have it separated to keep your project clean, right? And then you have JavaScript. Now the thing is, you probably use things like you do things like document, get element by ID, right, and stuff like that, to be able to capture some part of your HTML, and then you proceed to add some action, some behavior, or even style, add some styling. I mean, of course, you can do that. Add some styling, using JavaScript itself. Append some style classes, right, or IDs, depending on how you write your class. When using Vue, the amazing part about this is, of course, Vue is still JavaScript. It's a framework, right, sitting on top of JavaScript. So let's say Vue JS right here. So this is a framework, and what this is going to do for you is that it is going to make writing JavaScript code for your web project easy, right? It's going to make it simple. It's going to make it easy to understand what you have done. It's going to even reduce the amount of code you write, to perform some actions, and it will make it easier for you to reason about that code. Okay, so yes, you have your style, you also have, you have your HTML structure, and you have JavaScript. Now, the amazing thing about this is you don't necessarily need to, write a bunch of JavaScript code within your HTML code, or, I mean, it still gives you the ability to use what we call .view files, which are basically files that would, files that make you write HTML within templates, CSS within a style block, and your JavaScript or Vue.js code within the script block. So we're going to explore that. This is simple. The illustration looks simple, and I want you to also, you know, um, look at learning Vue from that angle. Okay, so we would understand the directives. We call them the directives. Some of the things that were added to Vue that you can simply use rather than trying to navigate your way into figuring out the elements or some other items. You can simply use those directives. Adding actions to those elements, or being able to trigger methods or your functions and all that. Okay, we're going to explore all that. Now, one other thing you should also know is that Vue gives you the ability to create what we call components. Okay, so you can actually create components. If you have a card, for example, say you have a card that you need to render. So you have a card that probably contains a text, an image. So let's say hello world right here. Let me zoom in on this so you can see it clearly. So this is a very simple illustration of a card, and then you have been able to create the base. I'm calling it the base card because it's something that we are going to be able we want to be able to recreate this particular card based on the data that we get, right? So let's assume you're working with a backend developer, and your backend developer is expected to give you a series of data, right? Probably the data would contain a title and a description. Okay, so this is believe you get. If you don't understand this, just ask a question. So you are expecting a title and maybe a date, right? So title and date for each of these items on the card, right? So this card might be like a blog post, right? It can also contain maybe short descriptions and all that. You are expecting this data from the backend. Ideally, when you get this data, using JavaScript or working with jQuery, you fetch this information. jQuery, I've mentioned that several times. It's also a simple library that you can use for making, some kind of, request, making backend calls using Ajax, right? Okay, so yeah, so in this case right now you have this simple component. Of course, you built this with HTML and CSS. Now, when working with Vue, you can actually create this as a component, separately in a different file, and then on your main page you can import this, you can render this, and then dynamically add the data that you got from the backend, right? Which is a different code that is hosted somewhere, on a server. You can get that data and then present that data, on the screen, depending on the length of the data you get. You can simply replicate that card with the dynamic data, and you can render that on your screen. So we're going to look at this, just in case you're confused by what I just said. We're going to look at this, and I'm sure by the time we start exploring, of course, from the scratch, it will be easier for you to understand what I'm trying to define. Okay. So for those of you that probably, you know, uh, that is probably confused, right, about what I just described here, let's go into the documentation and let's try to explore what Vue is and how Vue actually works. Okay. All right. So let's just go straight to quick starts, right? So if you take a look at this, you see there's a playground where you can experiment with Vue. All right. And if you want to probably experiment with me while I'm doing this, I am going to send the link into the chat. All right. So you can click on that link. If you're using your laptop, probably open a new tab or something and open that link so that we can experiment together. Okay. So if you take a look at this, you see you have the template section. Let me zoom in on this as well. Let's see, 150. Okay. Probably 175. And I'll take off my picture from there. Just give me a minute. Um, is that done? Okay. All right. So yeah. So I'm sure you can see this clearly. Okay. So you see that we have the template section here. This is where we basically get to put in our, HTML code, and we have this mustache, sign. So this is basically your curly braces, and we put two of them here. I would explain what this is doing shortly. Right here we have the scripts. This is the script section, that contains your JavaScript code, and of course there's a structure that you have to follow. Um, so we also have the templates, and then you can decide to also put in the style, right? So the style section would then contain your CSS style. Okay. So before I even dive into the script, let me just show if we have an example here. So let's say this is what we call title, right, as a style. So we can have title, and then we can have like color of red. Okay. So if I come in here, I can also put the class. Come on. Okay, that is title, not red. Title. All right. So this is something you're already familiar with, right? Regular HTML and CSS. Okay. So we are able to, add our style right here and then include that class. Okay. Whether it's yeah, I mean, the same way you can, style with your HTML, your regular HTML and CSS projects, you can do the same thing here. Now, of course, you can go an extra layer to, make your style even dynamic, but, that is something we'll discuss in a different class, just to show you that this should not look so weird to you, okay? So we're just able to create that clear separation. And when working on an actual project, locally, you would see that you can actually have this in a different file as well, just the same way style you create styles separately if that is what you want to do, right? Now within the script section here you can basically add, I don't know, when I hover I get to see some of these words. Okay, so within the script tag here you can basically write your or add your JavaScript code, whether it's a function, right, whether it's your data. So for example, the way you create a variable and you create message and you append a value, that is what you're seeing here. Okay, so this is added into the data. This is the data object here. So you see we have return, and we are returning the values we have in here. So I can return maybe first name, right? So let's say first name is Marv, or let's do John. Add a comma there, last name. Okay, so last name is Doe. All right. So now we have this. Of course, message is no longer available right here because we've taken it off. Okay. So but what we can do is that we can simply say we're bringing in, the first name just like this. So you see we have John right there. Okay. And you can as well go ahead and maybe we can create something here that would contain the last name. Okay. So let's do last name. Now it's weird. I don't know why I chose red for that. That's very weird. Okay. And first name. All right. So let's also put this. I'm going to make that change. So I just commented this. I'll come back to that. Let's come back here and let's just say regular black, maybe 1E, 1E, 1E. Okay, so now you see we have first name, we have, last name. And we're basically taking this data, from the script data object, right? So we're taking first name, we're taking last name. Okay. And we can also say maybe we have profile, and probably profile is an object. I mean, these are the kind of data you see, right? So you have profile, and profile happens to be an object. So we can then go ahead and take that record as well by saying profile dot first name, right? And profile dot last name. Okay, so let's stop here. Let's stop here for now. Let's try to understand what is actually going on. All right. So we have the scripts. Okay, we have the templates. The template basically would house your HTML, right? We have the style. The style would house your CSS styles, right? I mean, if you're working with CSS, if you're also working with things like SCSS, I mean, if you want to do some kind of compilation, from you know SCSS down to CSS. You can as well use that, right? You just have to install a couple of plugins, but I mean that's an advanced stuff to discuss. Okay, so we have the scripts holding your data. The script section can also hold what we call methods, right? Okay, so we'll get to talk about some of those lifecycle hooks. Where we'll get to talk about um, performing some actions when the page is just loading or when you're trying to leave the page. I mean, there are so many of them, and we'll discuss that. But using the method item here, we can basically create our regular, JavaScript methods, right? So, for example, we can have alert, and we can simply say, oh, we want to, probably call alert. Let's change this to show message or something. Okay, so we have our JavaScript alert that says hello world, just like this. All right, so we can actually include a button. So you see how this is easy, right? I can include a button and I can just say at click, right? Or we can say v on click, which is the right thing to actually do. So we can say v on click. But I would show you, initially I use at click. That's more of that's a shorthand, right? It's a shorthand way of doing this. So I can simply say click me, right? And I can bring in that particular method, which is show message that I just created. So show message. So I'm saying when I click on this, it should basically show that message, right? Which would simply call the alert function, and it would pass in that value hello world. So you can see that right here. Okay. This is not very visible, but I'm sure you can see that pop up. So when I click, I have that. When I do that again, click, I have that. All right. So this is just, yeah, and yeah, we can even go ahead to say we probably want to do something like this. We've done this in JavaScript. This dot first name. Let's do this dot first name. So if I simply say, okay, that is profile dot first name. Okay. So if I simply say hello with the first name, right? If I click, I have hello John, right? So that is hello John right there. Okay, we're going to take this back one step, and I'll first start by showing you how to use the CDN, so we can simply add views straight into our HTML code base, right, without necessarily getting to do this. Then I would also show you how to set this up locally and re-implement what we've done here. Okay, so this is just for you to see how easy it is to get started with Vue. We are going to mention most of the directives, most of these what these things are actually doing, and how to approach building simple projects, at least for now, with Vue. All right. So let's go ahead and close some of this. All right. Let's open. Yeah. So I created a repository. I created a folder here already. Okay. I'm going to start by I'm going to start by creating a simple project again. So let's just say touch index.html here, right? And I would love to open this in VS Code. Okay. All right. So that is it. All right. So this is simple. This is just a plain HTML file. There's nothing happening here, right? We are going to start by creating a simple boilerplate. So let's just put in this, and we have our boilerplate. And next, we're going to change the title to Vue JS. Let me see if you can see this well. Zoom in one more time. Okay. All right. So Vue JS example. So that is just the title. Let's go ahead and see that we can open this browser. Okay. Of course, I would like to. Okay, let's just ensure that this works. So H1, hello world. Let's come back here, refresh. Okay, good. So now we have our simple, HTML page. We are going to assume that we have a project. We have a project, and we are just trying to add Vue to that project. So we're not necessarily trying to build a full-blown Vue.js application. We already have our HTML project. It's simple, no big deal. We just want to make sure that we have Vue.js working on this project. Now, how you would go about that? You would have to use the CDN. So Vue has a CDN, and it has a link you can simply embed right here. So this is the link, https cdn.js deliver. So if you don't know JS deliver, you can basically grab a bunch of CDN links from this CDN, right? So those links would give you access to those scripts, right, within your code. Of course, you can choose to download it. You can choose to download this Vue.js script. If I should open this up on our browser, you're going to see um, you're simply going to see, the script itself. This is the Java, this is the Vue.js, compiled script. So you can simply download this, copy this and put it in a Vue.js file, right, locally, if that is what you want to do. But you can as well, use it directly, via the CDN. Okay. So long you have this, in the head, this is already going to have, it's going to give you access to Vue in this particular file. So we can start, writing some Vue code. If we simply go into the body here, we can create, scripts tag, right? And we can then initialize, we can create an instance, right? So let's just say we will create a Vue instance here. All right, so this is the point where we have to initialize Vue. So we just need to, let's just create the app instance. So we'll say new Vue, and we simply have to put this, this curly braces, within the brackets, sign here. And we have to then initialize that instance with the EL, um, yeah, so the EL element there. So we're simply going to say, we'll call this our new app, right? Or we can just call this app. Now, in order to allow Vue to start working within your body, within the HTML body, you simply have to ensure that you set this particular ID to work on a specific or a range of items, right? A range of HTML elements. So if you have, say, a base div, for example, you can then pass in this app, right? So everything that is right inside this particular div will have access to Vue. So given this is an example, right? This is a simple example. Everything you have within this div, right, would have access to use the Vue directives. Okay, so I'll show you an example here. If we have the data item that we have used before, right? So you can simply use the data item this way, or you can as well just say you want to use it like this, so you have to return, right? So this is what you saw me use earlier, but you can just choose to use it like this. The same thing that works, right? This works as well. Okay, so if I have, let's bring in the name. So this is going to be like the full name, right? So the full name, yeah. So remember on that full name, I think what we did was profile. So let's go back and do profile. So we did profile, and profile had first name, right? So profile first name had John, and last name we have Doe. Okay, so now we have that profile object there. We have profile dot first name, that's the key. We have the value of John, and the key last name has the value of Doe. All right. Okay, so this is what we have right now. No methods. We'll bring in methods later. Let's just go ahead and test this, to see if it actually works, right? So we can now go in here and say, bring in this mustache sign, which is what would allow us to call, these values, right? So if we say profile dot first name, for example, we can also add our style. Remember, we had a style there, but that is not necessary for now. Let's just save this. Let's come back to the browser. Let's refresh. So when I refresh, you see we have John, right? We did not have to do all the get element by ID and probably try to change the value, right, from your JavaScript code. Vue has given us, the ability to use, this sign here to make that adjustment, right, to present that item. We're going to look at some of the directives, right? I have them outlined here. We're going to look at those directives, and of course some of the examples I prepared, before this class. Um, yeah, and we can as well go ahead to say we have profile last name. Okay, so if I refresh this, now you see we have do. Okay, now if you probably prefer, right? Maybe you prefer to do what you would probably see yourself do. I mean, most of you have done this several times. So we have last name. Let's save that. Let's see what we have. Okay, so now you see we have a profile dot first name and the profile dot last name. We're simply adding that together, and you see we have John Doe, which means right within this mustache symbol, we can still go ahead and perform some sort of arithmetic, like operations in here. Okay, and that would be computed, and would get to see the results from what we've done. So does that mean we can also use the string, the template strings? Yes, we can. We can do that as well. Okay. So what we've done here is we've been able to bind the values that we have within this object right inside our h1 tag or h1 element. Okay. If this is not inside the app ID there, so you see this is what you get, right? Because it is not recognized as something that Vue can work with. It is not within this ID of app, which is what we set here, right? This can be something else. It can be John. You just have to make sure it corresponds with what you have in there. Okay. So now this makes sense because I remember working on some PHP code base back in the days, and I had some issues trying to make some things work. By the way, I'm not very good with PHP. I tried using it so many times. I worked on really big projects with PHP, but I know I am not good with PHP. I was always trying to hack my way around things, so I just feel I prefer to use some other languages rather than using PHP. So I found myself working on a PHP project, right? A language learning platform, and I think it was built with Code Igniter back then, right? And of course, after a while, we migrated to Laravel. But at the same time, I preferred, on the front end, it was a monolith application. I preferred to just, simply plug in Vue, for some specific actions, for some specific screens. When I'm trying to make things happen dynamically, right? I prefer to just plug in Vue, pick that record from, the data itself from PHP, and just use Vue to do all the dynamic presentation that I wanted to do. Right? It was amazing, and I'm sure right now a lot of Laravel developers enjoy working with Vue. I've seen stuff like that in the community. Right? You always see Laravel, and whenever you see Laravel and you're looking for a front end framework, it is mostly Vue. Right? So yeah, Vue makes it easy for you to build your applications. If I decide to also include the button like what I did the other time, I can have button. Okay, and I can have a V on click, right, which is what we did. So we can have equal. So yeah, here we have to put in the name of the method, right? So show message. Okay, and then we can put in the value. This can be click me, or this can just be show message. All right, so we don't have that method yet, so we need to create that method. In order to create that method, you just have to put in the method. This is called methods, right? And yeah, so now we have methods. We can say show message, right? And you can simply use a function like this, right? You can also choose to um, use this, okay? Even if you're working with the arrow function, I mean, it all works here. And of course, you can pass in parameters if you're expecting parameters, right? So if you're expecting like a name parameter, you can definitely do that. Of course, you can also pass in the name, right? If, for example, you want to pass in the name here, which is probably not necessary for this example. So let's just go with show message, take off the parameter for now, or the argument, and let's simply, yeah, let's simply show that alert, hello world. All right, so let's see, let's make sure that this works. Refresh this page, click on that. So you see we have hello world. I'll be looking at the chart shortly. So we have hello world, and we can as well, grab the items we have in here. Okay, so you can say maybe let first name equals this dot profile dot first name. I mean, you don't have to necessarily create variables. You can just pass this into string templates. But I want us to see that you can do this. Okay, so when we pass in this, we're basically getting the context, right? Okay, and then we can simply access other sections. We don't only have data and methods. There are so many things to explore, but we're going to dive into that shortly. Now this is more like you know showing you how easy it is to use Vue. And if you have questions while I'm doing this, please go ahead and drop them in the chat so I can take them before we then follow through on the documentation, and we'll start exploring some of the directives one after the other. Okay, so this dot profile is the profile dot last name. All right, so right here we can simply have our string templates and just say hello, passing this guy. So we'll say first name, right? Of course, we can also have last name, so we can choose to separate that as well. Last name. All right, so it's going to say hello, John Doe. All right, so if we go ahead and try this again, make sure you refresh that page. Let's click on show message. So you see we have hello, John Doe. All right, so I don't know how to actually zoom in on. I think I can do. Okay, so this is hello, John Doe. Let's take that back. All right, so let me look at the charts for questions. How do we download Vue.js locally? Well, we're getting to that. We're getting to that, Joy. Um, okay, so Botch Tech. Do you have any question? Lamidi, hi. Um, yeah. All right. So we are getting to that right now. I said we're going to follow. Okay. Someone said, how can I download this Vue.js and set it up, sir? Well, I think I shared that already. So okay. So this is it. We are currently using the CDN, Chooks, right? We're currently using the CDN. Okay. Um, so when using the CDN, you can simply work with this script. I'm sure you can see my screen. You can simply work with this script. So by including this script, you have access to Vue, right? And this is a use case where you are probably working on your project already, and you just want to make things dynamic, right? You want to start, you can build a calculator, you can build a lot of projects, right? Not something very complex, but something that has some functionality, and the Vue is what you use to make that page dynamic, right? In this instance, we're using Vue and we're using the CDN. We did not install Vue using npm, or we are not using Node, right? We're not using Node for this. So this is if you're working on a simple project, HTML, CSS, you just want to make things dynamic, you can use this. All right. And it makes sense. It makes sense because sometimes you might have a simple project, but then you want to render a bunch of items, right? You want to render a bunch of items. You get that flexibility. It's easy for you to use a for loop in here, and you just render those items. It's amazing. It's amazing compared to trying to do that with your regular JavaScript code. So just to show an example before we proceed, to show you why Vue gives you that flexibility, as I mentioned. So let's say we have some blocks, right? Now, of course, this is another random example. Okay, we have some blocks, and then within the block we have an array of objects, right? So your blog would have like a title and description, stuff like that. So now we have a title, just like this. We have a description, okay, just like this. So we probably have like multiple items. I'm just going to paste, okay. And here I would say we have blog 1, right? So we have blog 2, blog 3, all right? So this is blog 3, this is blog 2. And description can just be, Laura Ipsum, blah, 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 blah. Okay, so now that is the description, 1, 2, 3. So now we have 3 blog posts, right? As an example, we want to look through this blog post and present this blog post right on our page, right? So someone said, please, how can I get the code of the view? Okay, so I think I get the question you're asking. So this is the CDN. Let's navigate to our browser. You can just, this is it right here, but of course you can just search for Vue CDN. So let's see, so Vue CDN link. I can also share with you right here, but you can search for Vue CDN link, and you are probably going to grab that from let's see the quick start page. So let's see, blah blah blah. Where are you? Okay. So I'm going to drop it right here in the chat. All right, so that is it right there in the chat. That is the CDN link. But of course, when you are using it, you have to, append it within the script tag in the head. So let me just share the complete thing. By the way, this script is going to be shared with you. So I don't think you have a problem. Yeah, so this script is going to be shared with you. So this is how you basically put that the script, you pass in that script, right? And then you close with another script tag. So this will be shared with you. This will be shared with you. That's not a big deal, right? That will be shared with you. Um, okay, okay. Let's continue. So I was trying to show you an example. So we have blogs, and you probably want to show all these blogs on the screen, right? You probably want to show these blogs on the screen. And by the way, if this is confusing to you, then I'm assuming you did not take your time to join the JavaScript classes, right? You did not take your time to join or even review the videos from the JavaScript. We have not done anything, complex here, right? This is an object, okay? This is also, an object, right? This is an array of objects. This is an array of objects. So I don't think you should be confused by what I've done here, right? It's an array of objects. But I mean, if you are confused, okay, so point out where you are confused. Point out where you are confused in the chat right now, okay? So someone said, is it advisable? Yeah, please, if anybody can share that CDN link on LinkedIn, please do that, right? Please help me do that. I think Anikan is asking for the link, okay? Is it advisable to download Vue in my local machine, or I just have to be using? No, no, no. So as I said earlier, Chooks, this is a simple project. So Chooks, I believe you're already working with HTML and CSS, and you probably have, simple websites that you've built with HTML. If you want to include the CDN link, to that, if you want to include Vue into that project, and you don't, it's just a simple project. So there's no point trying to create a full-blown Vue application. Yes, you can include the CDN and you use it. Okay, you can include the CDN and use it in that project. Now, if you want to actually build an application that should perform some of these actions, maybe like a blog, right? Maybe like an app, like a to-do app, like an app where you have to log in, you have to sign up and do most of those things. Yes, it is better to actually install Vue, and we're getting to that. Okay, we're getting to that. You will see how I will do that shortly. So just be patient and listen. Okay. So now we have the blogs. If you are doing this with your regular, JavaScript, yes, you have to go into the script section, get those blog items probably from an array like this, do a for loop or a for each loop. And then you have to render each of these items after you've collected, the values of, after you've pointed at those HTML elements, you have to first point at those HTML elements using, document.get element by ID, blah, blah, blah. But in this case, we don't have to do that. We have the blogs. So we can just come in here, for example. Let's just assume I take this off and I say we have our recent blogs. Okay. So let's also take this. Or you know what? I'm going to comment on this because I said I was going to share it with you, right? So let's just say H1, recent blogs. And within this H1, I probably have a div to say we have our blogs, right? So now you see this is simple. I mean, this is the this is what you know how to do already, right? We have div class blogs, okay? And then within this, div class of blogs, we're simply going to now put in those items such as, let's put in a different div, and this is going to be an individual blog, right? So we're going to have a title, which is probably an H2. So let's call this the title, all right? And then maybe a P, let's call this the description. Now you don't have to use a bunch of classes. You can simply, do simple styling with the element. But yeah, so I'm just going to say we want to loop through that blog here. So we're simply going to say v4. Now this is a directive that we're going to be looking at as well. V4, this is view 4, right? So it's a directive that you can use to perform, that loop, right? So I can say for blog in blogs, I am simply trying to, grab all the blocks within this particular item, this particular array, right? So I just say v4 blog in blocks, okay? And I can simply come in here to say, okay, give me the blog dot title, right? And right here, give me the blog dot the description. Okay, so this is the directive. And if you look at this now, the directive is on the base. So you have to look at, like the structure, the way this is structured. We have a base div right here. Okay. This div has children. And the first child here, of course, this is a div, another div, right? So this div is going to basically hold, these two records, which is why I put it in a div, right? But I mean, it's not compulsory to be in a div. You probably just want to do it because you really want to have, that wrapper holding that item. Okay. And then, right here, we are looping, we are basically putting the loop right here on the blogs, right? And then we are saying, okay, now that we have the loops right here on the blogs, we simply want that to appear here. As a matter of fact, we can simply just say we want the blocks to be the container itself, and then we put the loop right here. So this makes more sense, right? This is going to be more like a grid or a flex, you simply want to allow those items show um, maybe in columns if that is how you want it to appear, right? And now this will basically present those items. We have not created any of these styles, okay? If we come back to our page and we refresh, you see we have block 1, block 2, and block 3 because we presented it this way. If I comment this out, you see we only have the titles. If I bring that back, you see we now have both the title and the description. Okay. All right. So now that was just to show you another example of the benefits of using Vue. But if you still need more details as to why you would probably want to use Vue instead of using CommonJS, using a framework. I mean, it all boils down to that simplicity. Okay, the fact that you can do a lot of things faster with some of those directives. It makes it easy for you to simply write your code. It makes you faster, right? So let's just take a look at this, right? Okay, so Vue is an open source JavaScript framework used for building user interfaces and single page applications. And these are some key points about Vue, right? It's a progressive framework. It's designed to be flexible and adaptable to projects of varying complexity. And it focuses primarily on the Vue layer, allowing for integration into existing projects or gradual adoption. So, which is what I showed you right now. So, we're basically trying to, gradually adopt, Vue in that simple HTML project. You already have your HTML project and you want to start adopting Vue gradually. That's a good use case to adopt the CDN. But if you want to build something from scratch, then you probably want to go ahead and set up a complete Vue project, which we're going to do next. Okay. Someone is asking the blocks in okay. Is it a class? No, no, no. That was come on. That was let's go back to that. Okay. So blog in blogs. I was referring to blogs. Now these are the blog. So it's more like saying for each of these blog in blogs, right? The way you write the for each loop, Obase. Okay. So the way you write the for each loop, um, yeah, that is Uwakwe Emeka. If you have looked at the curriculum, then you know you are also going to learn React. Okay, so I don't think anybody should be asking that kind of question. Why are we not using React? Why not? I mean, I can also ask you, why not Svelte, right? Why not Ember? Why not this? Why not that? So on our curriculum, we're going to teach you Vue. We'll also teach you React. At the end of the day, you have to make that choice for yourself, what you prefer working with. Um, when it comes to popularity, React is obviously, like, very popular, more popular than Vue in terms of, companies adopting it, right? But a lot of amazing companies as well, a lot of big companies and big projects are using Vue. Um, yeah, so it's not a matter of why are we not using A over B. You as a developer, you should be very flexible. You should learn to, use, of course, at different times. You should learn to, adopt new technologies and, learn to use them, right? Learn to use them. Yeah, we're going to learn React. Okay, so I have personally worked on lots of projects with React, with Vue, with Svelte, Ember JS, and a bunch of others. I think I mentioned that earlier. So it doesn't really, it's not about, A or B, right? You should learn to use them depending on where you find yourself. Okay, so let me go back to that document so we can read through. Um, yeah, so these are some of the key features. It's declarative rendering, right? Reactivity, which is what we've seen from that code. You can make changes, and those changes will be reflected on the fly without having to refresh the page, actually, right? So we'll get to see that as well in the next class. We have two-way data binding, right? So it creates that synchronization between the data and the UI. So while you render some items, when you make changes and you save, it's basically reflected on the fly. You can also have, kind of like with vbind, which is a directive in Vue, you can simply bind data to like an input field. So when you change the value in the input field, it changes automatically, maybe in the p tag or in the h1 tag, and you're going to see some of those things. Okay, so that two-way data binding is very impressive. Yeah, so it's simple, performance, right? Versatility. It has a large community, right? So when you have issues or challenges, you can always ask questions in the Vue community, and of course, you get your response as well. Okay. Um, so yeah, so you see what I have here, right? While they're both popular JavaScript frameworks, which is Vue and React, they have some key differences, and it's not necessarily about this or that. It depends on what you're building. It depends on the developers that you're working with. You might be an expert with Vue, and then you are hired into a company and they use React. Now there are some there's some similarities. There's some things to understand about the components patterns and the way, yeah, the idea around componentization, right? The way you componentize some of your CS, uh, um, some of those elements you have on your project. It can be like a blog card, right? It can be like some form items. Okay, you make them components and then you can reuse them. All right. So if you're looking for some of the key difference here, it's all about the difference in the approach, right? The syntax as well. Okay. The data binding patterns as well, right? The learning curve, right? Vue is generally considered to have like an easier learning curve with simpler syntax and a lot of built-in interfaces, a lot of built-in features. Sorry. Yeah, but of course, React is great. Okay, it doesn't directly provide a lot of internal toolings. You simply have to use plugins and yeah, and but it's also amazing, right? So it has I mean, they are both great. Okay, so in terms of flexibility, Vue comes with a preconfigured a preconfigured option where you basically, it asks you for, do you want to integrate state management? Do you want to put in this or put in that, right? But for React, you have to learn to do most of those configurations yourself. That doesn't make it. I don't think that makes it difficult. I think it depends on the developer experience as well. It also depends on the environment you find yourself. If you're getting into a place where they use React already, and you have some experience with Vue, you can easily adapt. If you also have some experience with React and you get into an environment where they use Vue, you can as well adapt. Okay, it's a framework, right, with documentation, so you don't have a problem. You just have to practice and learn how to use the patterns that have been created in that framework. All right. So yeah, you can take your time to read this as well because this will be pushed to GitHub and you have access to it. Let's go back to the documentation. Someone asked, how do I download and use this locally. Okay, so we're going to do that. Let's try to create a project again, but this time around, we want to set up this project as a Vue app, right? We're not using a CDN, we want to set up a Vue app. Now, what you have to do is you are going to install this with, you're going to create this with NPM. If you don't have NPM, we already mentioned that you should download Node.js, right? So go ahead, head over to the Node.js website and download Node.js if you don't have it already. Okay, so this is yeah. Well, let's see. This is 20.11.1 long-term support. So go ahead and download this, right? This is the latest one though, but yeah, just download this. This is recommended for most users. So click on download, and if you're using a Mac, Linux, or Windows machine, it will download the package file, whether as exe, as an executable on Windows, or maybe on Ubuntu as a Debian package, right? On a Mac, this is a package file, PKG. Okay, so just download this, double click, and then install, right? After installation, you can open your terminal and type npm to see if you actually have npm running. You can simply say the npm version, right? So npm-v gives you the npm version that you have on your laptop. Okay, and you can also do node-v to see the version of Node you are running. I'm currently running 18.7, but then there are other tools you can use to run multiple versions simultaneously, and that tool is called NVM. Okay, so but for now I'm using 18.17.1, and I also have npm installed. So in order to create a new Vue project, we are simply going to go back to the documentation here, and we're going to copy this npm create Vue at latest. So let's copy that, or you can simply click on this to copy. So let's come back here, and we're going to execute that. So when we run that, it is going to ask us some of these questions. Now, these are the pre-configuration we're talking about. What is the project name? Let's call this my blog app, right? So it's asking us, do you want to include TypeScript? For now, we're going to mostly use no for some of these additions because, you probably have not gotten to work with that before if you're new to this, okay? So I'm going to say no. Do you want to add GSS support? No. Do you want to add Vue Router, right, for single page application development? I'm going to say no because we have not gotten to the point where we work on multiple pages and do some routing. When we get there, then we'll, use Vue Router, right? Um, yeah, so we'll go with no. Pinia is for state management, right? State management simply means you are able to, get a bunch of data and save it, basically save it as a state. And when you get to other pages or, other sections of your app, you can simply grab those data and reuse them without having to fetch again, right? Because you've added it to your state. We'll get to that as well, and you would, I would make it easy. I would explain, right? And if you have questions, you can always raise your questions, while you're in class. Okay. So let's say no. Add vtest. So this is basically used for unit testing. As you can see, it is asking you this question. So if you are building an application, you want to add testing, you want to add state management, you want to add router, you want to add, JSS support. You have all these features. You can simply say yes, and it adds that to your project. So let's continue with no. It's asking us, do we want to include end-to-end testing, right? Using tools like Cypress, Nightwatch, or Playwright. So for now, we don't need any of those things, okay? So no, we don't need ESLints for code quality, but along the line, you'll get to see and understand how these things work, okay? So let's go with no. So now we have set up our project, right? So this is our project right here, my blog app. So it's telling you what to do. Navigate into, it's telling us done. Now run the following command. So first we have to go into the blog app, right? Second, we have to install. So when we run npm install, this is going to install all the packages that you have in the file that was created for you in that my blog app. So you have package.json. Now this is your Node.js setup for the Vue project, right? So it basically downloaded this and configured it based on your selection here, right? It gave you a simple HTML project, the source folder where you have all your, let's say, tree src. So you see it gave us that structure. This is the structure of the source directory. We have the assets, right? This right here we have the css and image files within the assets. We have the components, right? It gives us some basic components that actually came with the default templates, right? Including some icon based components. And then we also have the main.js file, but we have the app.view, which is the entry point of our application. Okay, so we have the app.view, which is the entry point of our application. So now remember, it asked us to actually run npm install before running npm run dev. So let's go ahead and run npm install first. Now that would basically install the packages you have within the package.json, right? So there's some packages right there that this will install, and that installation is happening at the moment. So let me look at the chart. Um, so for us downloading now, uh, should we be saying yes to this? I mean, you have not used this before, right? So when you say yes to all that, you are simply going to have a lot of libraries added to your project that you are not probably going to use. Okay, so you can go with no. You can go with no for this example, or even for the examples you're working on. Then along the line, you will get to learn what those libraries can do and how they work, so you can then integrate them. Okay, so now we have run npm install. It has added 28 packages, right, to this particular project. Okay, and you can basically confirm the packages. If you check package.json, you can see these are the packages that were added, right? So you see it added Vue, right, and it added some dev dependencies. So basically, those packages that were added are basically the packages that will be all right. Sorry, I believe you can still hear me. Amaka, please confirm if you can. Yeah, I had to quickly switch my
Yes, I
screen.
can still hear you.
Okay, okay. Apologies for that. My second screen actually went off, so I was looking at the charts on that second screen. So let's go back into this, right? And yeah, just probably just minimize this, trying to make sure. Just give me a second. So I have something open there, but I'm trying to make sure I don't expose the content of that page right on the screen here. So okay. Uh, all right. Apologies for that. Let's continue. Okay, so I'm going to go back in here, and you see I was saying that some of the packages installed were basically from the Vue package there. So the next thing is asking us to run. If you look at this, is npm run dev. Now that is the command, which is what you can see here under the script section, right? That would run vit. Now vit is basically what Vue is going to use to execute, that code, right? To bundle and execute that, in development mode. So let's go ahead and say npm run dev. Okay, so that will run a particular script inside this package.json file called dev. All right, so when I run this now, it says this is currently running locally, right, on localhost 5173. So this is the port. I just have to copy this. Okay, let's go back to our browser. Let's go back to this page here, and I can simply run this. So when I run this, it's going to open the default, this is the default page that we get because we just initialized a new project, okay? This is the default page we get. All right. So now that we have the default page, we can as well check what the code looks like, right? So let me stop this first. I'm going to open this up. I think I have that opened already. So let's go to VS Code. Okay, so I have that here. So this is my blog app, right? Let's close this for now. Close this as well. All right. So we have my blog app. So let's just talk about the structure. It's already past 9, and I usually don't like taking your time, but I wanted to break this down very well. So let me also take a look at the charts. So if you have questions, okay, yeah, uh, let's go back here. Give me a second. Let me just move that screen to a different. Let me move it away from my main screen so I can be looking at the chart while I'm explaining. I'm just going to take another 10 minutes of your time. Or yeah, 10 to 15. Yeah, 10 minutes of your time. That should do. To explain some of the details of this project, and then we'll continue from there tomorrow, right? So yeah, just okay. I think I have done that now. Apologies. Um, all right, let's continue. So right here, this is the blog app we just created. It is currently running. This is currently running. So the default things you're seeing on this screen basically comes from some of the items we have in the source folder. Okay. So first we have the public section here that contains your fav icon. Basically, the fav icon is what you see right here. Okay, that is what you're seeing right here. That's the fav icon. All right. And then we can also add, like, the OG image, if you know what that is. The OG image, we'll get to talk about that in the future as well. We have the git ignore file that was also added here by default, so that some of these things will not be added to git, right? Like your Cypress, if you're doing testing, the dist directory, the ds store, which is a Mac based dot file, right? Node modules, which is of course your packages. You don't want this module is usually heavy. You don't want this going to Git, okay, to GitHub, okay. All right. Yeah, so you don't want that to be tracked by Git. So this is the index.html file. So this is basically a default file that will be loaded on your browser. And then, based on that ID that I also mentioned earlier, it will simply populate everything that, the base app.view file would contain. So it would package the whole thing and render it within this div. Okay. All right. So let's simply, yeah, by the way, you see we also have JS config. So this is basically, configuration to say when I'm compiling, I want you to compile everything I have within the source, right? Everything in here. And of course, I want to also exclude node modules and the dist, directory. Okay, so these are just configuration files. You have package.json. Package.json, this contains the name of your application, the version of your application. You can add more details in here. So this is private. The type is module, right? So that we can use the ES6, right? Yeah, so the script options we have dev for basically running this on development mode, build for building our application for deployment, preview for simply performing, Vite previews, right? To see what that actually looks like. You're not in development or you're not building for production. Okay, and dependencies, right? So this is the major dependency we have. Okay, and these are some of the dev dependencies that makes our application work, right? So when bundling this, we definitely don't want to bundle alongside the dev dependencies. It's majorly dependencies for development. Okay, and when we add new dependencies, from the npm repository, so in order to check that out, we're going to be looking at that in the future as well. So if we go to npm, let's just go to npm repository. Let's, let's search for that, and we'll simply click on npmjs.com. All right. So when you click on this, this is where we're going to be downloading some packages from, right? You want to make network calls. You want to, do some there's some things you probably want to do, and we already have libraries that have been built for that. You just need to get them from here. You search for them, and I'll show you how to install that in your project and use it right inside your project. Okay. All right. So let's come back. So we'll go into the source. You see, we have assets. I mentioned already that this is where you put in, those assets. The way you use your HTML and CSS, regular HTML and CSS project structure. So you can have CSS, you can have audio or video, right? You can have, yeah, you can basically have those assets in here, and then you can import those assets into, your project. Okay, so let's just leave that for now. You have components. So these are the components that you are building for the purpose of reusability. You want to be able to reuse those components within the project. Okay, so like the block cards that I mentioned earlier, we'll get to see how to use that. You create components, add properties, and you should be able to call those components and dynamically add new values into those components. All right. So we'll see how to do that in the future as well. So this is our app.view our app.view file. I keep making that mistake. App.view file. Yes, this is our app.view file. And you see we are doing some dynamic, we're doing some imports here. We're importing some of those components. We're not going to be doing this right here. I'm going to delete some of these things because we don't need them. We also don't need this, right? These are just, some of the sample code that make all these things work. Okay. This is one of the components we brought in. You see, they just rendered that here like this. So you see, we have the component, the welcome, and then we render the welcome like this, right? So if I take off this header, for example, and I save, you see that header is gone. Let's bring it back in. It's here. So this is the header, right? Take it off, it's gone. Bring it back, it's right there. Okay. Take off the image, for example, just the image. You'll see that that image is gone. Let's bring it back here. It's right here. Okay. So yeah, just to show you how this is working on the fly, take that off. Let's also take off the welcome. So you see that is gone, right? I can bring in a new item, H1, welcome to my blog. Let's save that. You see we have welcome to my blog. Let's take off these items we have in the script, right? Let's just keep it simple. I'm going to say export defaults. Okay, let's keep it like that first for now. So we only have welcome to my blog right here. And I will also take off all the styles we have in here. Okay, so you see we have something that says scoped. Scoped is to say that when I create some styles here, it should not affect other components. I only want it to affect, everything within this component. It shouldn't affect another component, right? And I can also, create a page. So I can create maybe pages. I can create a particular, folder where I put in all my pages, right? I love to do this so I can have my pages structured properly, and then I can have the components rendered on those pages, right? And yeah, and within the app.view, I can then call the main page. Imagine I have an index page. So let's say on my website I have an index page. I have multiple pages, for example. So I can simply bring in those pages right in here, and then use what we call the view router, right, to move from one page to the other. Now we're not doing that on this call, but we're going to explore that tomorrow very well, right? Including those directives I mentioned, you can simply check the simple HTML view, click on those directives, probably preview like this, and you will be able to see all those directives, okay? So you see we have those directives. V model, how you use it, the description, what it does. V if, you want to do conditionals, for example. All right, so check if this is true. If that is not true, then do this, okay? So just to show you how that works, for example, um, I can simply create data, just like we've done before. I can do this like this, okay? So now we have data. And yeah, so now that we have data, I can simply say maybe enabled, right? Or I can say is open equals, yeah, this is true, okay? Good, so this is true. Now in here, I can simply create a div, right? So I have H1 that says is open, okay? So this is true, right? So if I save this, let's see what we have. Let's see, I think, is it a color thing? Let's try to verify, because I took off the style and all that. So I'm simply going to say maybe main, let's do a background of white, okay? And let's see if I'm making a mistake here. Let me start by bringing this. I'm trying to first bring, give me a second. So I'm trying to bring back, okay, the style. So let's see what that was actually doing. Oh, okay, I think I get it now. Okay, I should have refreshed. Okay, all right, that's fine, that's fine. So let's go back in here again. So data, put this, yeah, I'll simply say is open, true. So I'm going to simply have the first div here, all right, and this div has an H1 that says this is open, and we have another div that says this is closed. All right, so I have two divs here. One is saying this is open, one is saying this is closed. I'm trying to figure out, why do I need to first, yeah, why do I need to first refresh this? That's not good. Okay, so now I refresh. I have this is open, this is closed. So I can say v if, right, is open. Okay, so if I have v if is open, then it actually shows up there. If I change this to false, you see that v if that is open item is no longer there, right? So what I'm going to do is, let's keep it as false, and I will simply say v else right here. So now if it's open, so it's saying this is closed because this is not open up, right? So if I say true, now the idea is if this is open, this will be rendered, right? And of course, if it's not open, then this will not be rendered. So now you see we have this is open, right? Because it says true, right? If I say false, I save. Now you see if I refresh this again, this is closed, right? Because of course it's not open. We are false. So it gives us this is closed. Okay. So this is just how you basically use this particular directive. We have a lot of directives here. You can simply read up. vshow, v4, I used that already. vbind, von, and we have a shorthand. It's basically for, setting up your event listeners like click, hover, and all those kind of stuff. Okay. We have a lot of them and v1s, right? So, yeah, okay, so you can read up and utilize them. So someone mentioned, what about the style? That's a very good question. So let's go ahead and try to do something real quick and see how we can build up with the style. So we have main. So I can simply say we have main. Give me a width of 100%. Give me a height of 100 VH, right? And give me a background color of white. Okay. So now we have that. Let's save. So this is what we have right there. So I did width. Let's do 100 VW so we can just fill the whole thing. There's some items here. We'll probably need to, make sure that that is not affecting our work. But for now, let's just work with this example. What you can do is you can simply go into assets, go to main.css, and just make sure that all these stuffs are not disturbing your work. So you can simply go ahead and change the background, right? So this is for a hover. We don't need any of this. Let's take this off. Let's take this off. Okay, take all these guys off. We don't have any style for now. Even take off the base. I don't know what we have in there. So now you see this is just plain. One thing you will also notice is that our font is gone. So within the base, we basically have our font, configured, right? So we can of course make all these adjustments as well. This is the root item. Okay, we have a bunch of things going on here. I'm trying to look for the font import. So this is the font right here. So let's keep the font and take off. What else did I see there? Okay, let's keep that as well. Let's just take off the items we have in the roots, save. And now this is, simple, right? So we've taken off some of the things we do not need, right? And we can simply, do some styling in here, or we can also go back into our app and do some styling in here. So now this can be 100%, right? And we can, of course, add a margin if we want to. So let's do 80%, just like, oh yeah, that is definitely not right. So let's do width of 80% instead, right? And we can simply do margin 0 or 2. Okay, so we can at least have some gap here. So you see, I'm basically styling this, right? I'm basically, yeah, someone is saying, what if you have two different conditions? Yes, you can, of course, go ahead and put your conditions, right? Be if this is open or, whatever it is, and, right, you can do you can put your conditions there, or you can use what we call computed, variables. We'll get to discuss that in the next class. We have, computed, we have a bunch of other, lifecycle hooks that we can basically work with, right? We'll get to discuss that the next class. Okay, so this is a main, right? That's the style we have there. We have that H1, so you can style H1, right? Color, red. Done that before, remember? Okay, so that's your H1, blue, right? And if you have like some special cases where I call this a title, for example, you can simply have a title. Now remember, we're using a class, so I'm using the class selector, right? And I can say color green, save. So you see we have that. So yes, you can basically do most of the things you already know how to do, right, with your HTML, CSS, and JavaScript. And you have to then focus on understanding those directives. And as we progress, we're going to mention most of those directives. What is the name extension used in naming? So it's .vue, .vue, right? That is the extension. What about if you have to? I think I answered that already. How does the VLs know to check is open? Yeah, I mean that is the way it works. The next let's go back to that. So you see we have v if, right? So basically when you use VLs, it's basically going to check that that's that's root level, right? That's root level. So do I have a v if you don't have a v if and you're using a v else, then yes, you're going to have a problem, as you can see, right? So it is checking to ensure that I do have a v if in there on that level. Okay, that is for Dyro. Oh no, that's not Dyro, that is Botch Tech. Okay, what about the CSS file for styling? Yes, I said you can include the styling in here, or you can choose to also use like a separate style file. Okay, Joy Wilson, I hope that answers your question. Wakwe, okay, who else? Do you have any other questions? Um, all right. Do we have any other questions? We're going to continue tomorrow. We're going to dive into this, show you some examples, some practical examples. We'll create some sample components and all that. It's going to, trust me, it's going to be fun, right? If you don't understand some of the things I mentioned there, go back to this video, watch it again tonight, right? So that by tomorrow, you will basically follow along with the class. I want everybody on this call to follow along with that class. This is going to be easy for you if you have been following with the previous classes, if you understand how to write JavaScript, the simple JavaScript codes, right? And yeah, if you know how to do basic HTML and CSS, which is better between styling within the app.view um, and using the external main.cs. So it depends. It depends on what you're trying to do. If you have some styling that should be shared across multiple components, then it makes sense if you put that in a separate file. And it must not be in main.css. It can be a different CSS file. When you do that, you just have to come to main.js and import that style. So you see we have main.css. So it's a common practice to import main.css, and then within the main.css, you import the other CSS files like base or fonts.css, utility.css, whatever it is, right? So if you know you have styles that will be shared across multiple components or multiple pages, you can put them in here. But then for styles that will be used only within that component, it's great to put them in here and scope that style to make sure that whatever you style in here will not affect other files. You can create more files here. It must not be one, which is why I mentioned that we can actually create a pages file, a pages folder, and put all our pages like index page, about page, a bunch of pages. Okay, and then we use the view router. By the time we start working with the view router, we use the view router to navigate from one page to another. So we'll cover all these things. Don't rush. Okay, don't put pressure on yourself. Take it step by step. Try to understand what we've done today and probably what we'll do tomorrow as well. Then you can proceed to explore more until we meet again. Okay, so I'll see you tomorrow 8 p.m. What? Please make sure to join on time so we can utilize the time properly. Have a wonderful evening, guys, and I'll see you next time. Bye.